Hey everybody, this is Todd McLees. Welcome back to another episode of GrowthMinded Milwaukee. Our show focuses on entrepreneurs, business leaders, and their collaborations that serve as catalysts for the new economy in Milwaukee and the surrounding region. For this episode, I was joined in studio by nationally recognized LinkedIn guru Wayne Breitbarth. Wayne's energy is truly contagious. It's not surprising that he left behind the world of finance for a relationship-focused career. Wayne is the author of The Power Formula for LinkedIn Success. He is one of the foremost thought leaders on LinkedIn strategy. A Milwaukee native, he's an incredible person with an incredible passion for the Milwaukee community, highlighted by his recent move from McLees to the Sherman Park District. While we all watched in sadness and horror last August as riots overtook that neighborhood, rather than feeling unwelcome in the area, Wayne became even more motivated to make an impact. Today, Wayne is involved in numerous nonprofits throughout the city of Milwaukee and seemingly has no plans to slow down. It was a lot of fun to have Wayne in the studio, and I hope you enjoy the show. I don't watch game shows very often anymore, but I used to as a kid, and one of my favorite game shows was Family Feud. And I have to say that looking at your background, because it's all on your profile, if this were Family Feud and I asked 100 people, what professional background would you think leads to somebody pivoting and becoming a social selling expert and a foremost authority on LinkedIn? The top 6 answers wouldn't include CFO and finance, right? So can we talk a little bit about that transition in your career?
I think you're so right about that. And all I can say in general, it's just a God thing that it was 9 years ago as a 50-year-old business owner, and I owned an office furniture dealership here in town, and I was the 50% partner of that dealership, and I was that guy. I was the guy that stayed back at the office and counted the beans, made sure everybody got to work on time. And
you did work the word formula into your book title, so there's that.
I did that. You're right. And my partner went out and did the sales and did all the design work for our customers and that kind of thing. And we're one of the top 3 office furniture dealers here in southeastern Wisconsin, and we were in our second recession of owning that business in 2008. We bought the business in 2002, and boom, we got clobbered right away. And then 2008 came around again after a couple of pretty good years. We started digging ourselves out, and when that recession hit,
08, 09 shook a lot of people up.
Our business dropped in half. And being the bean counter, I remember telling my partner, I said, hey man, I'm counting half the beans around here. What are you doing about it? And it was easy for me to sort of shove it off on him because he was in charge of sales, right? And yet that wasn't fair, really. And the more I thought about that, I thought, is there something I could do? You know, what could I do sitting back here at the office? What could I bring to the table? But I wasn't understanding any of the social media stuff. But I was trying to figure out what I could do. You know, how could I help the sales process? Remembering that I had been in Milwaukee my entire career since 1979 when I graduated from Whitewater. I went to Arthur Anderson. I got my CPA. And so I know a lot of people, but I never sort of connected the dots between what that could mean for sales until a friend of mine was very persistent to bother me most Sundays after church. And he would say, Wayne, you're not on LinkedIn yet. And I said, you're right. You're the brightest guy in the room, Todd. I'm not going to be on LinkedIn.
Oh, the number of times I've heard that.
Yeah. And he said, but it'd help you. And I said, I know what you think, but I'm not doing it. I mean, I see what my daughters are doing on Facebook, and oh gosh, have a profile and people bother me, right? And one week he hit me with this statement. He said, listen, you remind me of one of those old curmudgeon guys who think that just showing up for work tomorrow, something's going to change. And that rattled around in this bald head of mine that whole week. And I happened to be in Holland, Michigan over at Hayworth that week. And we were there for a bunch of meetings, Tim and I. And we had a break in the action where I went back to my hotel room and I had a couple hours to burn in Holland, Michigan in March. Not much to do in Holland, Michigan in March, right? And I said, you know what? I kept hearing Todd telling me that I just expect things to change without doing something different. And I said, I'll try LinkedIn from the privacy of my own hotel room because I thought nobody's watching, right? And I looked at my watch and I said, 20 minutes. I'll give it 20 minutes because I'm pretty sure in 20 minutes I'll see it's just as stupid as I ever thought. In 15 minutes, I said, oh my gosh. And here was my connecting point. Milwaukee just got smaller. Mm-hmm. And what I saw in those 20 minutes was the whole Kevin Bacon thing. First degree, second degree, third degree, that you could see who your friends knew and then who they knew. Yeah. And I said, boy, that's powerful.
Milwaukee, you don't have to go to 6.
Exactly. And I said, you know what? I know a lot of people, but I've never known who they know. And I said, there's something here. And I ordered a couple books, being the CPA kind of learner guy that I was. I ordered a couple of books, LinkedIn for Dummies, and I'm on LinkedIn Now What? What a great title for a book. I'm on LinkedIn Now What? And I studied those books for 2 months, and I figured out how to use LinkedIn for our office furniture business. Long story short, then I just started realizing I had something hot here, that I had knowledge that people in Milwaukee didn't know.
Your book now, again, The Power Formula for LinkedIn Success. It's 3rd edition now. So still books. There's all sorts of online resources. Tell me about the success of the book, and are you working on a 4th edition? And
so it's interesting. When the first book came out, that was about the time, it was 2011. It was about the time that, sort of Kindle was starting and all this stuff, electronic books. And I really figured by this time there wouldn't be. I thought I would have a book, but I didn't think that you would be able to hold it in your hands anymore. I thought it would evolve and change that quickly. 5 years, a lot of things do change. But now it's 1/3 of the sales are electronic, but it seems to have flattened out over between the 2nd and 3rd edition. It's been totally flat. And because of the audience that I tend to be reaching and really resonate with, and I call that sort of baby boomers. Now I do teach at colleges and all that stuff, but the audience that needs me the most are those business owners that have had trouble embracing social media, trying to figure out what it is other than their kids and grandkids are doing it, and how it connects to them and their business or their retirement with their nonprofits or whatever they're trying to accomplish. They still like to hold on to what I call a manual, right? Yep. And this is a manual that you can mark up and that you can put notes on and you can dog ear, and it feels just like when you still went to school back 35 years ago, right? So I think until my audience all retire and don't need LinkedIn for their favorite nonprofits in their retirement, which I think I'll be fine, I'm probably still going to always have a physical book hanging out there.
You mentioned not-for-profits. How can not-for-profit organizations best use LinkedIn?
So I'm so glad you asked this, because when it boils down to it, I'm going to be 59 this month. And I love the time I get to spend with my nonprofits, right? I mean, we're all going there, right? Yep. With all our experience and expertise. And LinkedIn, what a database for nonprofits. I'll tell you one story. I was invited to work with a company called Axe Housing. And Axe Housing is an organization in town that takes foreclosed houses and puts people in them in neighborhoods where there's a lot of foreclosed houses. And they help sort of put a bridge loan to get the house fixed up. And then they might even help with sort of the down payment loan, right? And so they got to get these houses fixed up sort of on the cheap. And I met with their board and their staff, and I was saying LinkedIn is a database. And they were getting that. I was showing them some searches. And I said, so who are you guys looking for today? Like, what kind of person? Somebody raised their hand and said, we're looking for somebody to clear off some trees. I said, so a tree cutter, an arborist? Yeah, well, yeah. But we don't have a budget, right? We're trying to do this. And I said, let's try it. And I searched tree cutting, tree cutter, tree trimming, or arborist in the Milwaukee area. But then catch this, Todd. There's a special box on your profile that most people have added that says, I'm willing to do either volunteered service or be on a board. Yep. And so I searched those terms. Milwaukee is the second search. And the third filter I used was anybody that checked the box for skilled volunteering. 29 people came up on the list. I remember the lady who asked the question. She looked at that list and says, her jaw like this. I said, you see this? These are people that have said, I'm here and I'm an arborist and I want to be called. Well, 4 days later, she sent me an email and said, Wayne, the project is done. I said, what do you mean done? It was 3 houses in a row, actually, totally overgrown. She said, I got 2 of these guys that were on that list. They came out over the weekend. We're done. And now I also found out the Wisconsin Arborist Association has a spot on their website for organizations like ours. She said, we won't ever. Here's an issue.
They had no idea how to solve this. They had no money to do it. Right. And it's solved in a few
Where would you have done that before LinkedIn? Right. Fantastic.
People aren't walking around
stuff.
With tree cutters.
Yeah. Once again, it's a database.
Right. Yeah. One of the things we share in common, we learned very quickly, is great pizza. We love great pizza.
We sure do.
And so we did that. And I absolutely walked out of Pizza Man. loving the conversation that we ended with, which is your affinity and passion for what's going on in the central part of the city of Milwaukee. And you can share this, or I'll share it, but I would love you to tell some of the story. I mean, when you decided to downsize when kids go to school, you made a decision, a conscious decision to move into essentially the Sherman Park district in Milwaukee and be involved firsthand in what's going on in that part. And you've got a few different passion projects. One you launched yourself, and two you're deeply involved in. I'd love to spend some time talking about that. But let's start with your move from Eastbrook to Citybrook and Mequon to Milwaukee.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. And the sad thing is we've become famous in Sherman Park since August, and not for the right things. Many people saw it on TV all over the world, that riot or disturbance or whatever you want to call it. And that was a sad night, and it continues to be an ache to my heart with what took place that evening. And but I'm even more charged up to be there, my wife and I. And that move, which took place about 3 years ago, was partly smaller, downsize, kids are done, college paid for, love this job that I have, want to keep doing it. And we thought we were going to move to the east side, near the Downer. We love that area with the movie theaters and all that. Yep. And we just start looking at houses, and to me, they were too expensive. And all of a sudden, somebody said, we found some beautiful houses over in Sherman Park, and it was actually our real estate agent. She lives there. She used to go to Eastbrook. She moved her family in there, and she said, I found this house for you. And I said, I don't want to live in Sherman Park. And she said, come see the house. So we saw it once, fell in love with this beautiful 100-year-old bungalow that was in great shape yet, got in the car, still not interested, kept looking on the east side. Weeks go by. Pretty soon, we'd already sold our home in Mequon, so we had a deadline. And we were running out of time. One day my wife woke up and said, honey, either we're going to have to move to a temporary place before we find a place, or we should consider that house in Sherman Park. Let's go look at it again. We brought our daughters that time. Our daughters fell in love with it. They thought it was just a cool field to be in that part of the city. And God said, this is it, man. You're doing this house. And I figured, you know what? How much downside could there be to that, right? $175,000. How wrong could I be if in 2 years I don't like it? I lose $15,000. I go to the east side. Yep. 3 years later, we have met more great people than we did in 25 years in Mequon, and I love being in Mequon, don't get me wrong, but we've met more people. And we have people knock on our doors and introduce themselves. And when I told them, they said, where'd you move from? I said, Mequon. And they look at us like, huh? You moved Mequon to here? What's wrong? And I said, because we want to be here. Because we wanted to meet you. And I always said, because I was supposed to meet you. And they go, what do you mean meet me? I said, that's why I'm here. And we've had a blast there. And yes, it has its challenges, and we have times when we hear gunshots. We didn't hear that in Mequon. But you know, that's why we're there. We're there to meet one person at a time. I'm not there to change the whole community. I'm there to meet one person at a time and see who God's got planned for me to meet. And I don't know where any of it's going. And you mentioned the nonprofits. One of the reasons when it looked like God said we should go there, we said, by the way, it happens to be the place we spend our nonprofit time in that part of the city. So maybe that's another reason we're supposed to be there.
Let's talk a little bit about those. So Make a Difference is one you've been involved with for some time now.
Right. So Make a Difference Wisconsin is where we teach financial literacy in high schools, typically to juniors in high school. And it started off as an MPS-only project. Lloyd Levine in Milwaukee, it was his vision to do that. And MPS came alongside with a couple of nice sponsors at M&I Bank and MGIC. And we provided the financial literacy training to kids at MPS because a lot of those kids did not have parents that even had good financial habits, let alone to teach their kids what to do. And now we're in, we've taught 55,000 kids over the years, and we're in 80 schools a year, and we're even starting to get out in the suburbs a little bit, as much as that was not the mission, but we are Make a Difference Wisconsin. So we're getting called, and we're going in. And
I can tell you that there is a financial literacy issue with kids in the suburbs.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, I think about I didn't teach my kids. You know, right. Now they learn some things though just by being around.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
About, hey, we don't have the money for that this month. They learned that at least. And they knew we didn't go to check cashing stores.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they knew we went to banks, and banks were safe, and there was a reason. So we taught them without sitting down and saying, here's how you do a budget. Right?
Yeah.
You know, my kids, I did a budget with my daughter, but it's usually after they graduate from college. So Make a Difference does that. It's really exciting. And I do teach at Washington High, which is 1 block from my home. Mm-hmm. And I'm typically the guy that when they have, I've taught at Bradley Tech. I've taught at some of the schools that most of our volunteers, at least the first time around, might be a little nervous going into. But being a youth leader at my church for all those years, I was very comfortable with kids from the inner city. And now living there, no problem there too. So that's one of the nonprofits I love.
The schools you mentioned, people nervous today, but the alumni that went through, say, Washington with the Senator Cole and Bud Selig and the like, right?
Joe Zilber. And oh my God, who was the guy that just died a few months ago? Gene Wilder. He was at Washington High. What a famous school, right? We'd love to see some vibrancy come back into that school. And there's some cool things going on. Joe Bartolotta just started one of his schools for this culinary internship program is taking place at Washington High, where they're taking this old home ec room and turn it into a laboratory for these kids to learn how to be chefs. What a cool thing to do.
Right.
So that's neat. And another one that I'm involved in is called the Community Warehouse, which also has a division called Milwaukee Working. Community Warehouse provides home improvement supplies to people in the inner city at 10 cents on a dollar. So we get donations from Kohler and Lowe's and these kind of large organizations, and then we put their products on the racks, and you have to live in the inner city to be a member. So it's sort of like a membership club for home improvement stuff, but the stuff is super cheap because we're dealing with people in the inner city. Yep. And that's part of that organization. The other one is called Milwaukee Working, where we help people typically who have come out of jail and need sort of 6 months of grace to get started and have some cushion to getting back in the workforce, so that they don't get fired the very first time they don't show up for work because they didn't figure out that they better have people in line when their kids are sick. Because, right, you and I understood that you had to be at work. My dad taught me that. You had to be at work. You figured out a way to, the car busted down, you early enough to get a friend, whatever. You always thought of the B plan. You always got to work. Well, sometimes these people from our friends and the people who are in the inner city, they have never had that role model to understand. And so they have to understand, you got to put something in your life. Is grandma going to pop in when a kid is sick? Right. You got to still get to work and cut them some grace for 4 to 6 months before we send them out to a Harley Davidson or a Rockwell when they're ready to go. And so that's what we do. And we teach them a skill. We teach them online. We put books on Amazon. We build cabinets. We build pallets. We also do light assembly. So the job skills could be important and transferable into their next real employment, let's call it. But really, we're trying to teach them how to be good employees.
For people that are listening to the show or watching it on YouTube, what are the opportunities to get involved in the organizations that you've already mentioned? And then I want to talk about Urban Promise too.
Okay, so the ones I've mentioned so far, we always looking for volunteers. As a matter of fact, we have very cool volunteer opportunities for groups of people, like a church youth group. We took our church youth group down to the community warehouse for a Saturday morning project with parents. It was actually something we did with our life groups at our church with the families, where all morning with kids and parents, we did aisle by aisle. We cleaned windows that were on the racks and got dusty. Or we organized carpeting. We measured carpeting out so that it would have the dimensions on it. It was so much fun. So we have volunteer situations especially at the community warehouse for teams of people. At Make a Difference, we're looking for volunteers to go into the classroom. And that can be for one class. That could be for a full 6-class setup, or it can be somebody who wants to meet with kids once a month. We have a mentor program at Make a Difference where we go a little deeper. It's called Money Coach, where you spend the whole semester with a group of 4 kids, and they set up checking accounts. It's a deep dive kind of thing. So yeah, lots of volunteer opportunities, especially if you're interested in being involved in the city. We'll
make sure we put contact information in the show notes and then up on the screen on YouTube. But let's talk about Urban Promise, because that's something you started 7 years ago, right?
So the Urban Promise Lunch Club You won't find it on any website because it's just something that came out of an idea that I have, and it's my unofficial nonprofit opportunity. And what we do is, it's at two schools right now, St. Anthony's with another lady running it who went to the original one that's at Ronald Reagan High School. And so it's taking place at two schools, and we bring business people in once a month to meet with juniors and seniors. And these are inner city kids who, based on the two schools they're going to go to college. They're great high schools in this town. And yet their parents might not be able to help them navigate that junior, senior year, right? What school should they visit? Applications, financial aid, choices between this school and that school, debt, racking up debt, right? What does that look like from a payment stream when you get out of school? So we bring our volunteers in once a month and we just become friends. We have a little bit of a program. We eat lunch with the kids in the beginning and say, so how you doing on your applications, and follow up on stuff we did from the last meeting. One of us will get up and speak for about 10 or 15 minutes on, we got a pretty nice curriculum now, and we know what's high on their minds during this process and different times during the semester. And then after that little talk, then we go back into our table where we ate lunch and we talk about that topic. And then typically, like over the summer, for the juniors to seniors, we'll give them homework over the summer. In the summer, we'll say, do the following things. We want you to visit a couple of colleges. We want you to at least shadow one or two professionals in the area you're thinking of going into. So we have these things we want them over the summer to do so that when they come back in September as a senior, they're starting to really formulate what they might apply to, what schools and what majors. And then we dig into that for their senior year. So, that Urban Promise came out of an article I read about. It was taking place in Philadelphia. I bet I read this article 15 years ago, and I ripped it out of this magazine and I put it in my nightstand, and it just sat there till we were moving and I clean it out, throwing stuff out as we're moving. I said, I read this article. I said, I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to do this. And I got through the MPS hierarchy, and they assigned me Ronald Reagan High School. And funny thing about that one, Todd, is the meeting I had with the principal at Ronald Reagan when I was introducing this idea, and she said, oh, I love it. You're in. And this was in March, right before we wanted to do it this next September. Catch this. On the way out the door, I'm walking out with the assistant principal, and the assistant principal says, and I said to her, I said, by the way, you looking for any teachers next year? And she said, just one. And I said, it wouldn't happen to be choir, would it? She said, it is. And I said, my daughter's graduating from Wheaton this year. She wants to teach at an inner city school. Unbelievable. And this assistant principal said, your daughter? I said, yeah, she's in the conservatory. She's a great kid, and she wants to teach at an inner city school. And she said, when is she on spring break? I said, next week. She said, get her in here. She showed up the next week. She got the job. So I'm just saying, you know what? We do these things, and then we get blessed by what we're doing, right?
Yeah, I just got done with several other couples. We went through a book by a guy named Bob Goff, and it's called Love Does, and it's about sort of just jumping in and saying yes. And I have to say, it's so inspirational to watch the passion and energy that you put forth, not only about LinkedIn, but about the other things that you really care about. And I just think opportunities and serendipity and synchronicity all happen in those types of situations the more you involve yourself in those ways.
They sure do.
I just find it extraordinary.
I see every meeting, even meetings like this, right?
Yeah.
It's special, and I don't know what's going to come out of it. I know we're going to have a nice podcast.
Yeah, right.
But there'll be much more than that. There'll be much more than that, I'm pretty sure.
So this is the Growth Minded podcast. Wayne, thanks for taking the time today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much. It was a blast.
I really hope you enjoyed the conversation with Wayne. If you're struggling to define what success looks like on LinkedIn, be sure to look to Wayne for advice and guidance. He's very active on LinkedIn, offering free tips and strategies on seemingly a daily basis. GrowthMinded Milwaukee is available on the WTMJ mobile platform, iTunes, and YouTube. Subscribe to the show so you don't miss out on future episodes and announcements. You can also find the show notes to this episode on LinkedIn and at GMMKE.com. Until next time, thanks for joining us.